So for the introductory physiology, we want to look at the course outline and see what actually makes up the physiology that we need to know for this semester. What is this physiology? What does it talk about? In the morning, we studied some anatomy. So this time we want to look at a bit of what physiology and see what we have been trying to talk about earlier. So, not much withstanding, I want to take us to the course outline for physiology. I will discuss that. So, I hope we can see the physiology. Can we see the course outline?
Yes, please, we can see.
All right, thank you. So the same thing is an MLS program for level 100, Physiology 1. Course code is MLB 106 with 3 credit courses. And then it's a second semester course and for level 100. And the person who is supposed to take you through, they say, and Gabriel again. So let's look at how it goes. That's the email over there. And then, so for physiology, so anatomy, we were saying that you are looking at structures and other things. But physiology, we're actually looking at how the basic understanding of the functions. If you did remember in the morning, I told you that the mechanisms that are put in place to allow for the functions to happen. So we want to understand these mechanisms. Okay. So this is just to introduce physiology, and it will focus on functions and abnormalities of some system after looking at the basic physiology. So we'll be looking at some systems such as the musculoskeletal physiology, respiratory physiology, cardiovascular physiology, and then digestive physiology. So these are going to be the things we'll be looking at. So at the end of the semester, it is our objective that you should be able to illustrate the functions of a cell, look at the transport mechanisms in the cell membrane, look at the cell itself, see if the functions of the human body, respiratory, cardiovascular, and digestive systems, how they are normally posed as against in the pathological situations. And then last but not least, to also describe the common abnormalities pertaining to all these systems. So for the course content and topic, as I said earlier, please, this will be made available. Stop requesting for that. So we are going to look at course introduction and economic importance of physiology. Then we'll look at introduction to living cell and cell physiology. Under this, we should be looking at some living cell, the cell function and body fluid composition. Body fluid composition, I'm trying to talk about homeostasis. Then we'll look at cell membrane and functional chemical compositions. Then we might be talking about the fluid mosaic model. And then week 3, we are also going to look at cell physiology. We continue with the first cell physiology, where we are looking at transport mechanisms in cells and cell membrane. We'll look at membrane polarity, cytoskeleton, and permeability. Week 4, we continue with cell physiology. And then we look at the nerve cell. So we look at nervous physiology and secretory cell physiology. We start with musculoskeletal physiology, where we look at osteophysiology, the bones, the physiology in their working out. Then we'll look at muscle physiology and look at some clinical correlations. Week 6, we will do musculoskeletal physiology, where we'll look at osteophysiology, muscle physiology, and clinical correlations again. So that we'll do for 2 weeks or a week. And then we start with cardiovascular physiology, depending on how the assimilation and absorption is. Then week 7, as usual, you are going to write your mid-semester examination. And week 8, we'll be looking at cardiovascular physiology, where we'll look at heart structure and function, cardiac cycle. We'll talk about dromotropy, chromotropy, and ionotropy. When we look at the electrocardiogram, look at blood vessel and functions, look at vascular mechanisms for venous return, look at blood pressure, clinical correlations, and cardiovascular abnormalities. We'll also look at respiratory physiology, where we look at structure and function of the respiratory system and look at gaseous exchange mechanisms. So here we are looking at internal gaseous exchange and respiration. And then eventually we look at some clinical correlations. Then we continue with gastrointestinal physiology, that's GIT physiology, where we look at digestive system and then look at accessory digestive functions. Then we look at the ADME of ingested foods. When we say ADME of ingested foods, we're looking at the absorption, digestion, metabolism, and excretion of what? Some ingested foods. Then we'll look at the control mechanism of GIT tracts. And we'll look at the clinical correlation to digestive abnormalities. And then we'll look at some discussions on systemic physiology and abnormalities. And then we'll do some tutorial and then write your third end of sem exams from the 13th to the 16th week. The mode of delivery is going to be the same thing as applied to the anatomy. Now you understood what we are going to do. So same face-to-face, there are going to be video lectures and everything. And then for online, for online, I'm going to have video lectures and everything, and I'll come and teach. And then for face-to-face, we are going to do some form of lectures. And then we'll do some form of discussion. So that is how this one is going to go. Some few reading lists for us to go and look out for so that we can use it to study. So that is what we'll be doing for this semester. That is for Physiology 1. Physiology 1. Thank you. So now in the morning, spoken in medical language. Today we are going to speak. We are going to continue, but more mechanistically. More mechanistically. So without wasting so much time, I'm going to project the slides on introductory physiology. Introductory physiology. So introduction to physiology 1, that is MLB 106. So we want to know what physiology is. I'm this thing freezing. So who can tell me what physiology is? Yeah, someone, anybody? What is physiology? Yes, Joseph Mensah.
Physiology refers to the study of the external organs of an organism.
External organs of an organism.
Or the study of the entire organism.
Okay. That is not bad. Let's see other people's view. Kamasa.
Sir, please, physiology is the study of the functions of the various parts of the body.
The functions of the various parts of the body. Okay, let's see another person. Dominic.
Sir, physiology is the study of the abnormalities in the human body.
Abnormalities in the human body. Okay. But physiology is not abnormalities, but rather you're looking at normality. So
Normality.
abnormalities is more of it's pathophysiology. We are looking at pathophysiology. But if we are looking at physiology, we are looking at the normal mechanisms of functions. Okay. So thank you very much. Let's continue. So physiology, as we can see, is under biological science, and it deals with normal life phenomena. Normal life phenomena, as you can see, which is exhibited by all living organisms. And when we say normal life phenomena, it is telling us that we are looking at what function. So your day-to-day activities, how it comes about, that is physiology. So how this structure goes on by doing their day-to-day activities. Please kindly mute your mic. Thank you. Because the rules still hold. If your mics are unmuted, the class rep will take you out. So normal life phenomena, we are talking about the functional display by these organisms. For instance, you see a beautiful girl walking with their gluteus, the buttocks is so big, and then the guys are so confused and some cannot even resist anything. Before you realize, the penis is already up and injected in the what? In the trousers for everybody to see. It is a normal life phenomenon. You smell food around and then you are salivating and you are like, if I get this food, it is normal life phenomena. So how does that happen? The nose pick the smell signal and then relay the information to what? The smell cortex. That's the olfactory cortex, and then interpretation is given. How does that signal get there? What polarization and depolarizations are happening? What is the normal physiology, the nervous physiology that is conveying the message for interpretation? How does the interpretation happen? What is the mechanism for that interpretation to happen? That is physiology. You see a lion near the environment out of the blue. Involuntarily, your legs would begin to take your whole body to somewhere at the top speed. That is physiology. So physiology, we are just looking at the normal life phenomena. But when it deviates from normal life phenomena to pathological phenomena or abnormal phenomena, then we are going to have a system called pathophysiology. Pathophysiology. Please, Frederick Achuewuku, I have told you something. Stop requesting. I will not say that again. So human physiology, we are looking at this normal life phenomena in humans because we are going to deal with a human body. Or is anybody here going to deal with goats and fowls and other things? Maybe there could be some veterinary medicines here, medical officers here. So for now, you are dealing with medical lab science, which is pertaining to humans. So what's the goal? Physiology is concerned with explaining the physical and chemical factors that are responsible for the developmental progress of life. So day to day, you realize that you grow an inch. How does that happen? That is physiology. When you were born, your reasoning capacity was low. However, you could also learn fast. But as you age, your reasoning capacity is also becoming bigger. However, your learning abilities might reduce. That is physiology. What brings about that? That is what we are saying the goal of physiology is. So for you to be able to understand all these things, we need something we call physiology. So physiology is actually a Greek word which means the study of nature with involving physics and chemistry. So it actually comes from a Greek word which is directed to the application of physics and chemistry towards nature. And it serves the basis for pathophysiology, as I've explained already. So you will be able to, for instance, if someone is having malaria, the first thing you think about is the temperature. The temperature. So, oh, the person is around 37.9. Oh, this person is having some serious conditions. Because the normal physiology, the temperature should be around less than 37 or 37.1 plus or minus 2. Sorry, plus or minus 0.2. So if you are having a temperature that is more than that, then it's beginning to be, it serves as a problem. So physiology is now going to tell you what brings about that increase. When the bacteria or parasite entered into the body, what could be the mechanisms? What are the signal transactions that has led to that increase in what? The temperature. Physiology will explain that together with biochem. Physiology also serves as basis for the study of pharmacology. In the sense that physiology is able to tell you these are the systems, this is how it works. We could mimic these systems so that drugs can be developed for those systems. For instance, you have you know that when you eat or when you want to fight, adrenaline will go and bind to adrenaline receptors, and then your system becomes very charged. However, someone is depressed, so you say, oh, let's give him a stimulant. So physiology would help us to steady those adrenaline so that we can develop the drugs to mimic the adrenaline. So it also serves as a basis for pharmacology. Then physiology also serves as the basis of immunology, which I explained earlier in the morning lecture. That when you take drugs, when bacteria or virus or let's say pathogens enter into your system or microbes enter into your system, the immune cells, that microbes are going to bind to certain things, which will release certain fluids or chemicals that are going to what? Activate the immune mechanisms. So physiology is actually involved in all other parts of science. However, it also depends on the anatomy. As I said, physiology and biochem are doing the same thing. So physiology or biochem will serve as what? Basis for each other. And also microbiology. I've already explained that. Why do we need to study physiology? Why do we need to study physiology? So if we understand physiology, we will be able to understand the principles that underline the normal function. Okay, so for instance, I've already explained that when I was talking about what pharmacology. So we understand the physiology, and then we know that, oh, if I give this particular drug, it will bind to this receptor and it will block the progression of the release of this particular hormone, so it will cure the person. That is physiology and pharmacology at work. However, if you don't understand the physiology, you may not be able to understand the pharmacology. So as I said, all the courses we are going to read, especially the basics course, especially this semester and the next semester, are actually linked to each other. So you can't say you like A and you don't like B. You can't say you like anatomy and you don't like physiology, or you don't like biochem. Especially those three things: biochem, physiology, anatomy. Next semester I did something called histology. All of them are together, because it is on them that other faculties of medical sciences, of health sciences, are built on. Excuse me. Now that we look at we know what physiology is, let's look at the organization of the human body. So the human body begins with cells. Already explained these things in the morning. Then these cells come together with similar function to form tissues. And then the tissues also come together to form organs. So you realize that tissues are bigger than cells and organs are bigger than tissues. Then from there we have the organ systems, and then we have the organism, which a human body is an organism. So in studying physiology, we can study physiology around the cells. So we can look at cell physiology, we can look at tissue physiology, organ physiology, organosystematic, systemic physiology, and then can look at organisms. So this is how the human body is organized, and this is how we study them. The research is about how we study. So now, let's look at, now that we understand what physiology is and the body makeup, composition of an organism, let's look at how the organisms, the systems within the organism, that is the organ system, how they interplay with each other. So for instance, I'm going to make this more practical. Let's say we have Ajwa and Kofi involved in a fight, and then Kofi slaps Ajwa. How does Ajwa retaliate? So the very first thing is that when that slap lands on the skin, which is the integumentary system, when that slap lands on the skin, which is integumentary system, this skin is going to have a connection with the cell. So within the cell, the impulse is going to travel and then gets to the nervous system. So the nervous system will relay the information to the brain, and then the brain will say, oh no, this is a slap, so you need to do something. So with that, you feel the pain and you are also very agitated, because the nervous system will have a communication with the endocrine system. And then the endocrine system together with the nervous system will then give out a feedback mechanism. So the feedback mechanism is that Ajwa is going to cry or Ajwa will retaliate. So when that happens, you could also have the musculoskeletal system, which is going to, you are now also going to throw your blows. So the musculoskeletal system is going to be involved. That means you have some form of depolarization across the membrane and everything. But before these things, the musculoskeletal system must work. Then your heart is going to start beating faster to circulate blood. So that means that the cardiovascular system is going to cause a lot of circulation, quick circulation. And when that happens, the mituration, when you say mituration, urination, digestion within the body ceases a bit. You begin to breathe faster. That is when the respiratory system also comes in. And when you are breathing fast, don't expect your urinary system to be developing urine. So you realize that all the systems are linked together. Also, when we take it through the reproductive system, you're going to have beautiful sexual intercourse, and then the semen was released into you. You are going to have conception, and then the baby is going to develop and have all these systems in place. So all that we are trying to say here is that you take food into the digestive system and it comes out. That digestive system, when you take food is going to be absorbed into the blood system. So the circulatory system is going to kind of take the end product of this food, digested foods, and then it will hand it over to the tissues. Now, when it hands over to the tissues, so for instance, glucose gets to the tissues or amino acid gets to the tissues, then the respiratory system is now going to take in oxygen. So the oxygen is going to get to the tissue, which the oxygen is going to be used to burn the glucose. Hence, you have respiration and you have energy to work. Now, when this energy is being produced, carbon dioxide is also going to be produced, which is going to be exhaled out of the system. Now, what we have to know is that in course of time, about 25% of your cardiac output will come towards the kidney. And the kidney is going to help you excrete waste substances, as well as what the anus and something. So you realize that all the systems are put in place to allow for their work. Excuse me, I don't know why my machine is freezing. Let me work on it. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Hey, that means all this while you've not been hearing me. Eh?
Yeah.
For how
Yes,
long?
please. About like 5 or 6 minutes now.
Where about that?
When you said your laptop,
Okay, okay. So let's restart from there. Please kindly mute your mic. Okay. So I think we were here, right? You heard.
Yeah, we were there. Organization of the human body.
Okay. Then it means I have to do all these parts again. So we want to look at the integration between the body because I've already taught all these parts. So wow, that's fine. So we are looking at the human body, the systems, how they are integrated with each other. What we are trying to say is that we are looking at the nervous system. For instance, I'm going to give a practical example. So we have Ajua and what? Maybe Kofi involved in a fight. And then Ajua slaps Kofi heavily. The next thing we realized was Kofi crying. So what is the interplay between the systems? So as the land on the skin, there are a lot of receptors within the skin that will convey the information to the nervous system, which will play between. So that nervous system is going to cause some hormonal releases, which is going to cause Kofi to cry. However, if Kofi gets angry, information is going to be relayed from the nervous system to the musculoskeletal system, where there is going to be what? Contraction and relaxation of the muscle for Kofi to be involved in a fight. And this is happening because they are involved in a fight. Circulatory system is going to be at work, and the respiratory system is also going to be at work. So all these systems are placed together to work together. The other side of it is that when you take in food, when you ingest food through the digestive system, it gets absorbed into the circulatory system. So when it's absorbed into the circulatory system, then the circulatory system is going to take the end product of this food, for instance, glucose and amino acids and other things, take them to the tissue. And when they get to the tissue, what is going to happen is that there's going to be respiration. And how does this respiration occur? When the food gets to the tissues, respiratory system is going to convey oxygen to the food, the end product. So this is going to cause a bind. There's going to be a fueling. So if you know the car system, you realize that the air goes into the injectors, and then eventually you have what? Combustion. It's the same thing that happens within the tissue level. So oxygen is going to get, which is going to be bounded with what? Carbohydrate, which is glucose, and then your energy is produced. So when your energy is produced, energy can be transferred to the musculoskeletal as through calories or ATPs, and then that begins to work. Now, as your circulatory system and respiratory system are working, you also have your renal system working, because some of the food material become toxic, they become end products which are unwanted. So you have what? The renal system excreting the unwanted products which you take out as urine. You can also ingest undigested food substances through the anus. So that is for that one. So now that we know about this, let us now look at how the body fluids between the cells brings about this activity. Give me 1 minute. Let me take my charger. My phone and my laptop is going off. Thank you very much. I'm now back. Let's continue. So we are looking at the differences between the internal environment and the external environment. That is what we call homeostasis. Homeostasis. So, for instance, going back to the earlier slide, let's look at something. You have, let's say, something we call edema. What is causing that edema in the respiratory system? So this will explain it to us. So the total body water is usually, now this body water is divided into extracellular fluid and intracellular fluid. So extracellular fluid, we are looking at tissues that are outside the cell, and intracellular, we are looking at tissues that are within the cell. That is when I got to the whiteboard and I was trying to explain that. So we are saying that when you take a cell, the tissues the fluid that you find within the cell, the fluid that we will find within the cell is what we call the intracellular fluid. And those that you find outside the cell is what we call the extracellular fluid. And we are saying that the extracellular fluid, which surrounds the cell, is making about 33% of the total body weight, body fluid. Whilst the one inside here is about 66.7%. So we are looking at 1/3 being extracellular, 1/3 being what? Intracellular. So if there should be a transfer of material between the cell, across the cell membrane, there should be something that is happening between the extracellular and then the intracellular fluid. So this is just to show what I was saying earlier. So we have your cells over here. All these cells will come up together to form a tissue. That's why we say interstitial fluid. Okay, so the interstitial will be found between the cells. So the interstitial fluid, yeah. And if you did remember, the interstitial fluids are example of extracellular fluids because they are outside. And then we also have the blood being what, or the plasma being an extracellular fluid. So what we have to know is that the extracellular fluid actually, we use the term bath the body cells, cleans the cells, and also convey all form of what? Indirect, or let me say, unwanted substances or toxic substances within the body. So the extracellular fluids are key in maintaining homeostasis. One thing we have to know is that for homeostasis to occur, there must be an interplay between the internal environment and external environment, such that the internal environment ionic conditions will be approximately the same as that of the external environment. When that happens, you may not be having what? A transfer between the internal and the external environment of the cell. Now, some examples of these extracellular fluids that we can talk about, aside the plasma, we could also have the pericardial fluid, which is found within the heart chamber, not the chamber of the heart, but within the pericardial part of the heart. The heart is actually covered in a fibrous substance that we call pericardium. So between this pericardium, we have a fluid there which we call the pericardial fluid. And this fluid actually serves as a shock absorber for the heart. We can also have pleural fluid. It's the same phenomena as what pericardial fluid, but in this one, we are seeing this in the respiratory system, covering the lungs, also serving as what? Shock absorbers for the lungs. And then we can also have cerebrospinal fluid. All these serve as extracellular fluids. So what then is homeostasis? So when we say homeostasis, I know you have done some cell biology in your first semester, right? Have you done any cell biology in your first semester?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes,
sir.
yes.
Yes,
I
sir.
know
Yes,
you
sir.
learned homeostasis, right?
Yes. No, we didn't do homeostasis.
You are
No,
sure
we
that you
didn't do
have done
homeostasis.
homeostasis.
We didn't talk about homeostasis.
All right, let's continue. Doesn't matter. It's not like I'm coming to quiz you on it, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Sir.
So homeostasis, we are trying to maintain, okay, a relatively constant physiochemical conditions of the internal environment. So when I was giving the example that, for instance, you are having your temperature rising because maybe you have malaria. Now, what is going to happen is that, how does the body bring back that temperature to normality? If it is worsened, you take in drugs, and the drugs are going to kind of go through a lot of physiochemical pathways that is going to allow for maintaining these constant physiochemical conditions. So usually, practicals that are being done here is that you have a salt water, you put an animal cell inside, and you see how it acts. And you have a normal water, you put an animal cell inside, you see how it acts. Same way you put plant cells inside and you see how they act. That will tell you what these things are. At a point, you realize that the internal environment, we have to maintain it so that we do not have any fluctuations that will come from the internal environment, external environment. When this happens, we call it homeostasis. Maintenance of relatively constant physiochemical conditions of the internal environment. Then according to Claude Bernard, he says that the internal environment remains relatively constant, though there are changes in the external environment. Listen to this. Relatively constant remains relatively constant. It doesn't say that constant, but the word here is relatively constant because you cannot have same temperature even within the same minute. So what we have to say is that we notice that for homeostasis, you should have a relatively stable physiochemical conditions. Note that these stable conditions is not rigid, hence it can vary. It can vary. So the goal of every organ for it to function better is that it has to maintain stasis. The goal of every organ is to maintain homeostasis, to allow them to do or go on to deal with their normal activities. For instance, for contraction to happen in the muscles, you need an amount of what? Potassium and chlorine, intracellular as compared to extracellular. So when there is a movement across the plasma membrane, you have depolarization, which brings about contraction. But assuming there is a disease condition and you are suffering from uncontrolled spasms, that is no longer homeostasis because something is not okay there. The homeostasis, you want to actually maintain the body physiochemical conditions internally. So now let's try and see some physiological homeostatical conditions that we need to know. For instance, if you have not eaten early in the morning, your arterial pH should be between 7.35 to 7.45. Now, this pH range, what is it? Is it acidic or alkalinic?
This is alkalinic.
Alkalinic. So the
Yes,
question
sir.
you need to ask yourself is that why is the alkalinic and not acidic or neutral? Some of these questions I will ask you and I will not explain. It implies that you go and find out. Why do we need to have bicarbonate components? Bicarbonate components. You know what a bicarbonate does? Who knows what bicarbonate does? Because we are doing biochemistry. So who knows what bicarbonate does? Yes, anybody can raise their hand. I'll call you. Bicarbonate. Hey, should I go and tell your biochemistry lecturer that you say you don't know bicarbonate?
It's not like you don't know, but we've not gotten there. That's why.
Hey, everything you've not got in there. Let's continue. Yeah, someone wants to talk. Imran Tete. Yes. Tete, you can talk.
Yes. Hello.
Tete, I can't hear anything. Just mute your mic. And you can type your answer in the chat column. Michael Ankra.
Sir, the bicarbonate.
the acid balance.
Yes,
It can
bicarbonate.
help to keep the acid base balance.
Hello, Tete. I can't hear anything. Just mute your mic, please. And type it for us.
Hello. What's up? Hello.
Ankra, you talk.
The-
Tete, mute your mic.
The bicarbonate is a substance called base, which the body needs to keep a normal body acidic basic pH.
In which system do you find this bicarbonate mostly?
So I think it's in the digestive system.
Hey, are you sure? Go and find out. Selassie Kwashi.
Okay.
Kwashi Selassie.
They said they've already said it. They've said it.
Hey, are you? Ernest Kobe. Ernest has quickly lowered his hand. Daniel Jamesi.
Yeah, but I think I remember where it can be found also.
Where?
It's in the pancreas.
Bicarbonate.
Yeah.
You go and look out for it also.
Okay, sir.
All right, let's continue. So, assuming your bicarbonate components are very high, what do you think will happen? This time I'm asking some few questions. Let's say you have your bicarbonate components very high. What do you think will happen to your system? Take that as a rhetorical iPhone. Who is iPhone? If you want to answer, you can talk. Oh, iPhone, you've lowered your hand. Okay. Take this as a rhetorical question. Okay, Ernest Kobe, yes. Ernest Kobe, your hand is up.
Yeah. Please, I was talking about the bicarbonate. You said where it's found, and I think it says found in the human body.
Oh, we know it's in the human body, but which system is it engulfed from?
Where is engulfed from?
Where do we get it? Like, where can we, let's say production of bicarbonates and all those things, how do we get it? That's what I want to know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yes, Adote Richmond, you want to
yeah, sir, please. It's found in the respiratory system.
Good.
Or
Right. So now I'm asking if we have more bicarbonate, let's say you have high levels of bicarbonate, what is going to happen? So I'm just trying to tell you how my questions will be. I'm not going to ask you what is physiology, what is that, and what is that. Do we understand? Now let's continue. So bicarbonate, this particular substance allows for the inhalation and exhalation procedure as well as oxygen. Okay, so the normal carbonate component should be 24 to 28 millicol per liter, and then for oxygen we're looking at 17.2 to 22.0 millimole per 100 mil. And then the amount of, so this is just to tell you that for homeostasis to be maintained, your arterial pressure should be around this, your bicarbonate should be around this range, your oxygen should be around this range, your glucose should be around this range. Someone says high level of bicarbonate causes pH increase in the tissue. That is beautiful. But what will be the end result? Nashin Nano, you stated that. So what will be the end result? Just think about it. Let's continue with the lecture. So now let's look at how we can look at homeostasis and control. So all these things that we are saying is actually happening within the cell. It's happening within the cell. So organism in homeostasis. Homeostasis actually occur between the external, when there is differences within the external environment change and also the internal environmental change. These changes are going to cause internal changes which result in the loss of homeostasis. For instance, the temperature difference I was talking about. Or you have a medical condition and then you are suffering from acidosis. That is loss of homeostasis. So when there is loss of homeostasis, the organism attempts to compensate for this. When it succeeds this, then you become well. But when you do not succeed, then you become diseased or you become ill. That is how humans get ill. So successful compensation for homeostasis will re-establish homeostasis. Failure to compensate for that will lead to pathophysiology. And that is how we study pathophysiology. For instance, I can tell you, explain the pathophysiology of temperature increase or fever. Let me just put it like that, fever. That is a whole lot. You need to tell us the origination of fever, looking at the hypothalamus with all the other composite structures that are involved in maintaining temperature. Or someone is becoming dehydrated. How does the person compensate for this? And then when there is higher pathophysiology, there is going to be illness. If this illness is not controlled, then there is going to be death. Now that we've seen the cell, we've spoken a little on physiology. Look at homeostasis, looking at the internal environment and the external environment. The next thing we want to look at is regulation of the functions. We are looking at regulation of the body functions. So regulation, is it the same as homeostasis? If yes, explain. If no, explain. The regulation is the ability of an organism to maintain a stable internal condition, which is going to lead to homeostasis. Because the internal environment is constantly changing, there should be mechanisms that will regulate that changing environment. That will lead to what? Homeostasis. So there are three types of regulation. We have hormonal regulation, which we call chemical regulation, where the regulatory process is performed by a hormone or an active chemical substance in the blood. The second one, before we look at the second one, usually a chemical regulation responds slowly and also acts for a longer time. And it also acts extensively. What it means is that for chemical, if you want something to be fast, for instance, someone is dying, you don't expect to do hormonal regulations. So we want, if you want the thing that to act for longer time, then hormonal regulation is the best. The second one is the nervous regulation, where the body functions are being controlled by the nervous system. For instance, the fever that I spoke about is a nervous regulation. You are involved in a fight. Your heart is beating fast. After the fight, your heart comes down. It's nervous regulation. So the process that are involved in these body functions, that is what we call the regulation. So the ability of you to maintain that stable temperature, internal condition, which is homeostasis. So under nervous regulation, there are a lot of pathways that are involved in this nervous regulation, which we can call the reflex mechanisms. Now, reflex mechanisms can be unconditioned reflex or conditioned reflex. Yes, Adote Richmond, your hand is up. Please, if you raise your hand, you want to ask a question, you talk. If you don't want to ask a question, please do not raise your hand. So let's continue. We are looking at pathway regulations. Hello, please give me 1 minute. So we said that this reflex mechanism can be conditioned or unconditioned. So the question is, what is unconditioned reflex and what is conditioned reflex? When we look at the next slide, we're going to look at that. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
So who can tell me what is unconditioned reflex and what is conditioned reflex? Anybody want to try? So usually unconditioned reflexes are reflexes that are innate. When we say innate, we are talking about it is inborn, okay, since birth. But for the conditioned one, it's something like this that is kind of acquired, okay, something that is acquired. For instance, babies, you can have innate immunity and you have acquired immunity. Please, Francis, mute your mic. So we have innate immunity and acquired immunity. Same way we have regulations for the nervous reflex. We have what? Innate reflex and we have acquired reflex, which we call unconditioned reflex and conditioned reflex, respectively. Example, for instance, when we look at the baroreceptor reflex of arterial blood pressure. So the baroreceptors are receptors that will pick the pressure within the arteries. So if the pressure is too much, then they use mechanisms that will convey through the nervous line to reduce the pressure, allowing maybe the arteries to dilate to reduce the pressure. So these mechanisms are actually fast and they act locally, but it lasts for a short time. That is what nervous reflex. The third one, so the first one we say chemical or hormonal reflex. The second one we said nervous reflex. And the third one we are looking at auto-regulation. So when we say auto-regulation, we are looking at a tissue or an organ that can directly respond to the external changes that are independent of the nervous and hormonal control. So what we are trying to say here is that, for instance, if you have maybe a system put in place, maybe how water flows into the cell, okay, how water flows into the cell. And then when it gets into the cell, there is going to be some form of regulation between the internal and external environment. That mechanism does not depend, which may not depend on the hormonal or nervous supply, is what we call autoregulation. Usually, one thing about this type of regulation is that they are usually smaller. The effect is usually smaller than the other two. The main ones are the hormonal and then the nervous regulation. So what we have to note is that the regulation mechanisms in the body act as one system, which we call the feedback control system. The feedback control system. So we call them the feedback mechanisms, where we can talk about positive feedback mechanisms and negative feedback mechanisms. So let's look at the control systems, and then we can continue from there. Any question to this stage? Any question? Today is the first lecture. I do not want to run with you. So any question, because understanding this basis will help us progress better for the subsequent lectures. Any question? Okay, so the control systems hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear
Yes,
you.
sir. Yes, sir. We can hear. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
so
sir.
the control systems are, we can have those that are feedback controls, and then those that are non-automatic controls. We'll be looking at them one by one. So speaking about feedback, we are looking at mechanisms that are put in place to control certain actions. So when there is a negative feedback, what does it mean? And when there is a positive feedback, what does it mean? Yes, Fortune Tete, your hand is up. Fortune Tete, I've mentioned your name. If you want to ask the question,
Hello, sir.
yes.
Sir. Oh, now I want to ask you a question, but I'm okay. I understand it.
Oh, okay. All right. Can we continue?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's continue. So we're going to look at the various feedback mechanisms, look at the difference between negative feedback and positive feedback mechanism, and look at the one loop system. But before that, we've been hearing of negative feedback, negative feedback, negative feedback. Is that not true?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So who can explain to me what negative feedback mechanism is? Or what is feedback mechanism? I know you are seeing this one on the screen, but I don't want you to use this one. I want you to use a scenario to explain feedback mechanism. Use a scenario.
Okay, sir.
Who is talking?
Hello, sir.
Who is talking?
Sir Francis.
All right, continue.
When we talk about the feedback mechanism, for instance, you said
can you move
when
away?
the-
I don't know. You are giving us too much feedback. Yes, I'm also giving you the feedback now. So you are giving us too much feedback. So if you can move away from. So even this scenario I just gave right now have explained the feedback mechanism. Nonetheless, Francis, continue. Hello, Francis. Okay, thanks, Francis. Let's look at other people that are ready to talk. Victoria Asari. Victoria Asari.
Hello, sir.
I can hear you.
Sorry, please. This is Francis. It's like my data bundle. I'm sorry, sir. As you said earlier on, when the human body or the sugar in the human blood rises or becomes very high, the hypothalamus stimulates the pancreas to release insulin. This insulin helps to reduce the glucose in the pancreas or change it from the blood sugar and then moves it to the liver as glycogen, which is a negative feedback because the sugar level or the sugar concentration increased. And then because it increased, the hypothalamus also stimulated the pancreas to reduce the sugar. So if the action if the response of the body systems act in opposite direction as the feedback signal inputted earlier on, we can say it is a negative feedback. That is when something happens and then parts of the body or the body systems act in opposite direction. I'm just using this one for some of us to understand. Act in opposite direction to what is actually happening in the system. We can call it a negative feedback. That's how I understand negative feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis. And I'll say that the scenario you gave is a perfect example of negative feedback mechanism. So negative feedback mechanism is when the output gets into the input such that it reduces the effect. And that is exactly what Francis said. So who can give a scenario on the positive feedback mechanism? Anybody? Anybody? Oh, nobody. Do we know of labor? Do you know what is labor?
Yes,
okay, some
please.
people want to talk. Someone wants to talk. Ernest Kobe. This Ernest Kobe, when I call him, he
so I was trying to answer what you said, positive feedback scenario. So I was thinking positive feedback mechanism, they help like amplify the direction in the initial stimulus and push the body further away from homeostasis. So I was giving a scenario like immediately you mentioned labor, I was thinking the contractions in childbirth.
Good. That's beautiful. That's very beautiful. Oh, you guys are good. That's beautiful. So as Ernest Kobe is saying, positive feedback instead of reducing or trying to go back to homeostasis will rather take the action further away from homeostasis. So it's like amplifying the condition. But for negative feedback, it goes to direct the thing towards homeostasis. Let's just put it like that. So the instance that Francis gave us concerning with someone having high glucose or someone is hyperglycemic. So the feedback mechanism to return the person to a normal glycemic state, it's what we call negative feedback mechanism. Nonetheless, for labor, what happens is that the very initial kick will then will send informations to kind of intensify the labor process again. That is positive feedback mechanism. So you realize that when labor begins, it begins slowly. Then before you realize, the contraction becomes small. This one is only the women that will understand it better than we do. But what we know is that there is going to be more spasms of the muscles of the uterus, and that is going to expel the baby out. So that is positive feedback mechanism. Okay, that is beautiful. Can someone also explain the open loop system for me, or non-automatic control mechanism? Anybody? Yes, Fortune 30. Fortune 30. Oh, Fortune 30 is gone. She doesn't want to talk again, or he doesn't want to talk again. Anybody? So what we have to note is that the open loop or the non-automatic control is a non-feedback mechanism. So the feedback mechanisms will take the output back to the input. But for the non-feedback mechanisms, the output is not taken to the input. For instance, you don't expect let me just use the labor. Okay, so if it were an open-ended, or let me say the open loop system, what is going to happen is that when the oxytocin is released, you don't get a further, it doesn't go to add to the earlier one, which is going to intensify the contraction method. So it doesn't go into the input channel, but rather goes through another thing. So that is what the non-automatic feedback or non-feedback mechanisms. So what we also have to note is that in the non-feedback mechanism or the open loop control, the output has no control on the action of the system. So the feedback signal, okay, the signal that we get from the output has no control, okay, on the action. So the feedback does not go to amplify or reduce whatever action that was taken is happening earlier. So if we know of non-automatic control as open loop system, who can tell me what is a closed loop system? What is a closed loop system? Okay, I'll leave you with that to go and read on what closed loops is. If it applies with humans innately, or is what something that we need external forces to use to work. Okay, someone has written something here. I'm trying to read, but okay, someone has placed. You can go to the chat page and you see what someone placed there, talking about the non-automatic feedback mechanism or non-feedback mechanism, which is employed in different behaviors or skills that you are learning. Now let's continue. We don't have much time. So we spoke about all this already. So what we need to know, one thing we need to know in negative feedback is that the opposite effect is mainly inhibitory. It inhibits the effect. But for positive feedback, it promotes the effect or activates it, okay? So in the control systems, in the negative feedback, for instance, in the cardiovascular and the endocrine systems, so you have a reference signal, and then it goes to we have a comparator. The comparator is what you compare to, okay? Then you have the errors, then you have the controller. So in the negative feedback, for instance, when we take the scenario Francis gave, who can tell me what is the reference signal? What is the comparator? What is the error signal? What is the controller? And what are the effectors? Anybody? Anybody? Okay. So what we are trying to say is that there is an maybe increase in a chemical. This increase in a chemical will deviate from the normal range. So this becomes an error signal. This error signal will be detected by what? The controller. In this case, the hypothalamus. And then the controller will now tell the effectors, which is the pancreas, to secrete certain things that will regulate the glucose level, which is the variable. This will then get back to the sensor, and then the feedback goes back to the comparator to see if it is normal or not. That is the negative feedback mechanism. So what we have to know is that the stimulus triggers response to counteract the further change in the same direction. So I've explained a lot of negative feedback mechanisms. So let me just use this particular one. Can you see the pointer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're looking at the picture at the right, okay? So you have a lot of heat in the body. Now the heat you have in the body, for feedback mechanism to be employed, negative feedback mechanism to be employed, you are going to have blood vessels being dilated. Okay, but before that thing happened, how do you know that this is supposed to happen? So for instance, the very first thing is that you have conserved heat in your body. Maybe you are not exercising, you have conserved heat in your body, and then the vessels have constricted and you are not sweating. So the temperature here will increase. So this is the fever mechanism I was talking about. When the temperature increases, it is going to act on the brain. By which part of the brain? The hypothalamus. Now, when it gets to the hypothalamus or the hypothalamus pituitary gonadal pathway, what is going to happen is that during the hypothalamus hypophyseal action, when we say hypothalamus hypophyseal, we are talking about the hypothalamus and then the pituitary gland. So information is going to be taken to that particular organ, and then it is going to convey an information for the blood vessels within the skin to dilate. When they dilate, then you are going to have heat being released. You also sweat better, and then the temperature will decrease. When the temperature decreases, it has to be maintained. So there must be a feedback mechanism that will tell the brain that the temperature has decreased. So stop releasing the hormones or the chemicals again. But if it doesn't happen, then that is where hypothalamus will continue giving signals, and then you now have a very too cold state. But that two cold states will also pass through these mechanisms again, and then eventually you reach homeostasis. Positive feedback. So I've already explained a lot of feedback mechanisms. So for instance, you want to go to the loo. So it begins small. If you are not minding it, it will continue increasing. Then you're beginning to feel more urge to go to the loo. That is a positive feedback mechanism. The same thing applies in micturition, that is urine. And then when we come to what? Liver. When we come to liver. So that is where we can experience some form of positive feedback mechanisms. The importance of these mechanisms or control systems is to enhance the action of the original stimulus or amplify or reinforce the change to promote an activity to finish so that you can give. But one thing is that if positive feedback is not controlled, you can die out of it. So that's why we call it as a vicious cycle. If it is not controlled well, it can cause death. Any questions? Any questions? No questions. Let us continue. So you realize that at times you want to touch something hot and your hand is even shaking. You are beginning to feel some shakiness before you touch the thing. You have not even experienced the thing, no, but your brain or your system is telling you that this is how you are going to feel the experience. So it gives certain signals that will make you have some form of intention about or perception about the thing. That is what we call the feed-forward control system. Now, the concept here is that the direct effect of the stimulus on the control system before the action is taken. So, for instance, you want to swim in a cold water, or you want to bath a cold water, your body begins to shiver a little. That shivering is just to accumulate some heat within you so that you can bath the cold water. That is also another system. So the significance of feed-forward control is to make the human body to foresee and adapt the environment promptly or exactly, which I've already explained. So this brings us to the end of feedback mechanisms. Now we'll just use some few minutes to go through the cell so that we can be done with the cell. And next time we meet, we will look at the cell membrane and transport mechanisms within the cell membrane. Okay, come see the slide.
No, sir,
Hello.
you can't see.
Can you see?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes.
You
Sir,
can
you
see.
can see.
Okay. I don't know. My laptop is freezing.
Set.
Hello? Yeah, okay. So we will end here for today. We'll continue next week.
Okay, sir.
Nonetheless, maybe before next week, you may have the lectures on cell and its components. You listen to them before you come for class. Do we understand?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Next thing I'm going to talk about is that we may not be having the lectures in the afternoon time because afternoon time for physiology is a bit problematic. So we may be having that. Please listen to me. We may be having that lecture probably Monday mornings, early mornings, so that at this time you are free. We will not do. We don't want to do any studies in the afternoon. So Monday mornings we'll look at physiology. Tuesday mornings we'll look at anatomy, or it can be the vice versa.
Okay, sir.
Do we
Okay,
understand
sir,
what
is it
I'm
a
saying?
face-to-face or online?
No, for online. The face-to-face remains the same as it is on the timetable. The
Okay, sir.
face-to-face
That's
remains
very
the
good.
same as it is on the timetable. But for the online, Monday, we are going to do early morning lecture that is starting from either 5:30 to 6:30 or
Wow.
6:45.
Okay, sir.
Tuesday morning, you will do the same thing for anatomy. Do we understand? Yes,
Yes,
NFT.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
NS Kobe.
Sir, please, sir, I was asking a question.
Okay.
Sir, please, I was asking about the body regulation, the physiological pH buffering system in the body. So I was asking if, say, the normal state of the body, as in maybe the digestive system. So is it always first acidic before whatever process that will lead to it being neutralized, as in adding alkalinity?
No,
So is
please.
it always the acid state first before the alkalinity?
No, please.
Oh, okay.
Who is saying said the next lecturer is waiting? You must know my lecture ends at 2 p.m. So that person sending that information, be careful.
So we are sorry. So we are sorry.
Okay.
So, sir, please.
Yes.
Sir, please. So what do you say about acidosis?
I think I asked you that question. So why are you asking me back? When I was talking about the bicarbonates.
So I'm reviewing it because I don't get something there.
What don't you get?
So I don't get the fact that as in too much acid in the blood, then the state is being neutralized by an alkali. What I'm trying to ask is that in the digestive system, as in when you are neutralizing the state there,
which state, at which section of the digestive system? Because for instance, when you get to the stomach, that is when we have an acidic condition for whatever thing to happen. When you get to the duodenum, it becomes alkalinic. When you get to somewhere, so it's a different, that's what I'm asking, at which system are you talking about?
Okay, so I'm talking about the digestive system.
Yes, and I'm saying that this digestive system is at different states and different alkaline,
Okay, the stomach.
So the stomach, what about it? You must know that the pH within the stomach is even higher than sulfuric acid. It's about 3. Okay, the pH is about 3. So what is happening is that it's not like it's going to be neutralized, but those pH are the normal range for those enzymes within that particular place to work.
Okay.
So when it comes to that place, we are not looking at whether the thing is what we are looking at gearing towards homeostasis or not, but we are looking at the normal functioning of the enzymes within that particular region.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So we will continue next week. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Bye.